3-seat majority. So if the Democrats win at least 4 seats or 3 seats plus the White House, they'll retake the Senate. The map shows Senate Republicans defending 23 states, Democrats 12. The best pickup chance for the GOP is in Alabama.
Hey guys, welcome back to the 6th episode of my Fixing American Democracy series. We are truly in the battle to reimagine American politics for generations, and I mean generations to come. As you may remember from the 2 previous episodes where I talked about reforming our United States House of Representatives, like expanding the size and also installing mixed member proportional to conduct U.S. House elections, you learned in those previous episodes, such as mixed member proportional, you get 2 votes. Where in the first vote, this would be your electric vote, where you rank as many candidates in order of preference. And whoever gets 50% or more of the total votes will be elected as your local representative. While your second vote, that'll appear on the right side of the ballot, you get to vote for one political party. And how many votes a party gets in the proportional party vote will determine how many seats each party will receive in the U.S. House of Representatives. But remember, a party must get either 5% of the party vote or win 1 electric seat to be represented in the United States House of Representatives. But what about changing the way we elect our senators to represent us in the United States Senate? Because each state gets only 2 senators regardless of population, and only a half of senators are usually up for re-election when it comes to midterms and presidential election years. And something like mixed member proportional can only work in electing U.S. House of Representatives. And ask yourself the question, is there any other proportional voting method that can elect U.S. senators, that can elect our U.S. senators and achieve a proportional outcome in the United States Senate, because while still following the Constitution of every state gets only 2 senators regardless of population, which ultimately satisfies the small states. Well, after all consideration, after all research I did and thinking, I found another voting method, and it's that we can use to achieve proportionality in the United States Senate, and it's called dual member proportional. But before I begin, I'll let my Canadian friends take it away in explaining dual member proportional, or DMP. So here's the video, and I'll be right back.
To the House of Commons in Ottawa using the voting system called First Past the Post. Unfortunately, this system tends to distort the decisions Canadians make with their votes. For example, in the 2015 federal election, the Liberal Party received all 10 seats in New Brunswick, yet almost half of New Brunswick voters chose a different party. Canada needs a voting system that is more representative at the local level and more proportional overall. This video will introduce you to one such system. It's called Dual Member Proportional, or DMP. Let's take a closer look. In the current First Past the Post voting system, each riding is essentially a winner-take-all race for the most votes. The winner becomes the riding's Member of Parliament, or MP. Her job is to represent everyone who lives in the riding, even if most of the people voted for somebody else. Unfortunately, an MP is likely to represent some of her constituents better than others. She simply may not appreciate all her constituents' needs. With DMP, every riding would elect not 1, but 2 local MPs. These MPs may be from the same party, but more likely they'll be from 2 different parties. With 2 MPs instead of 1, many more constituents will have their views represented in the House of Commons. You might be asking, wouldn't having a second representative in every riding double the number of MPs? It wouldn't. Although there'd be twice as many MPs per riding, the ridings would double in size so that the overall number of MPs remains the same. So how does DMP work? Let's find out by looking at a simulation. The simulation is based on actual votes cast in the 2015 election. We'll zero in on a particular region, the province of Alberta. In 2015, Alberta had 34 federal ridings. Under DMP, there would be 17 larger ridings as shown. Let's compare a typical ballot under DMP to a First Past the Post ballot. We'll focus on the hypothetical riding of Edmonton Northwest. This is what a ballot looks like under the current First Past the Post voting system. With DMP, only one thing changes. Parties can now run candidates in teams of 2, so a second name appears beside some of the circles. Voting works the same as in the current system by marking the ballot with a single X. By placing an X beside the NDP team, a voter supports the NDP candidates and the party itself. By marking an X beside the Conservative team, a voter supports the Conservative candidates and the Conservative Party. Once the polls close in Edmonton Northwest, the votes are counted. Here's the number of votes that would have been received by each candidate or the team of candidates according to the 2015 election. With over 53,000 votes, the Conservative Party wins the riding. That means the primary Conservative candidate, Kelly McCauley, is elected. He will serve as an MP for Edmonton Northwest. The secondary Conservative candidate, Michael Cooper, is given a chance to win the second seat. He receives half the votes for the Conservative Party in the riding. All the other secondary candidates are eliminated. The remaining candidates are subject to a local threshold, which we assume to be 5%. Any candidate with fewer than 5% of the votes is eliminated. Independents are elected if they place first or second in the riding. An independent who places third or lower is eliminated. We're left with just 3 contenders for the second seat: a Liberal candidate, an NDP candidate, and the secondary Conservative candidate. One of them will win the second seat in the riding of Edmonton Northwest. Now let's look at the entire region of Alberta. The Conservatives win the first seat in 16 of the 17 ridings, while the remaining seat goes to the NDP. To figure out who gets the second seat in each riding, we look at the popular vote. The popular vote determines how many of Alberta's 34 seats should be allocated to each party. The next step is key. We take the seats that each party should receive and subtract the seats they've already won. That tells us how many remaining seats should be awarded to each party. Each party's remaining seats are assigned to their most popular remaining candidates, with the caveat that only 2 candidates in any riding can be elected. The more votes a candidate gets in her riding, the more likely she is to receive one of her party's remaining seats. That's how DMP works. Let's take a look at the results of the simulation. Here's how Albertans voted in the federal election of 2015. Based on the popular vote, the Conservative Party deserves 21 seats. The Liberals deserve 9 seats, and 4 seats should go to the NDP. A purely proportional system would grant the Green Party 1 seat. In the actual 2015 election, the first-past-the-post voting system gave the Conservative Party an extra 25% of the seats, at the expense of those who voted for the other 3 parties. With DMP, the Green Party still loses its seat due to the 5% local threshold, but otherwise the voters' decisions are correctly reflected in the overall seat distribution. Now let's look at the entire country. Here's the nationwide popular vote from 2015. Under first-past-the-post, the Liberals picked up an extra 15% of the seats. These seats came at the expense of the majority of Canadian voters who supported other parties. Supporters of the Green Party were left severely underrepresented, electing only 1 MP. Under DMP, the Green Party elects 4 MPs in total. All parties end up within a couple percentage points of their fair share of the seats. DMP is easy for all voters and fair to all parties. It's one practical way to improve representation and achieve proportionality. Do you think dual-member proportional might be the right voting system for Canada? If so, take action. Share this video on social media. Also, write or email your MP about DMP. Thanks for watching.
As you learned from the video, dual-member proportional is a new voting method being proposed in Canada as part of their Electoral Reform package. As the video put it, DMP is an electoral system that aims to create proportional election results across the region by electing 2 representatives per riding. As the video put it, every riding will elect 2 MPs, and these MPs may be from the same party, but they will be more likely to be from 2 different parties, since it aims to deliver a proportional outcome. Based on the voting method, and as the film put it, a ballot under DMP is very similar to your first-past-the-post ballot, but only one thing changes. Parties can now run candidates in teams of 2, which is their primary and secondary candidate. As assigning the seats, the primary candidate that gets the highest percentage of the vote will win the first seat in that riding. But when it comes to the second such remaining seat, it's determined proportionally. This is to achieve proportional representation from every region of the country, and it's done by employing a calculation that rewards political parties, where they had done very well or had their most strongest performance in pretty much any region of the country. But as you may know, under DMP, once a party's primary candidates that has the most votes in the district and does ultimately win the first seat in the end in that region of the country, if they receive half of the votes or 50%, they also get a chance to win the second Senate seat, that riding, and all the other secondary candidates are eliminated. The remaining primary candidates are subject to a 5% local threshold, and any candidates that are under 5% of the vote are eliminated. And independents will only be elected if they place first, which is pretty much receiving the highest percentage of the vote, or if they place second in the riding. An independent that places third or lower is automatically eliminated. How do we figure out who gets second seats? Who look at we look at the popular vote, and this will tell us how many remaining seats should be allocated to each party. The next step is important, because we take the seats each party should receive and subtract it to the seats they've already won. And this will tell us how many seats left should be allocated to each party. Each party's remaining seats is chosen by their popular remaining candidates, and that's ultimately how dual member proportional works. But under dual member proportional to elect U.S. senators, it would be very different to how the people of Canada will do it. And the main reason why is because of the one ideal difference under the U.S. form instead of the Canadian form. Yet under the U.S. form of dual member proportional, that it will ultimately get rid of the first past the post ballot and adopt a preferential voting ballot to DMP that elects our senators, which is pretty much a ranked choice voting ballot. Let's take a closer look at what happened and what a DMP ballot will look like to elect U.S. senators. As you see, with the ballot, all the candidates running for the two California U.S. Senate seats are all ranked in order of the voters' preference, with David Moore, the no party preference candidate, as the voters' most favorite choice, while the other candidates, like the Libertarian Party Senate candidate, is ranked as the voters' second choice if David Moore is in place first or second in the state. This is to make sure overall that no one's first choice vote is wasted, and all voters will all have the power to weigh in on the remaining party's candidates that receive 5% of the vote, and will overall help determine who will be the first primary candidate that will receive the highest percentage of the vote to win the first Senate seat, and as well help determine who will receive the remaining seats in all states. Plus, I think it's good for democracy if no one's vote is wasted at all. And the one common reform, though, that has to happen is proposing a constitutional amendment that changes U.S. senators and U.S. representative terms, where they both serve 4 years, which would be the same amount of years as the president's term. This would mean all U.S. senators would be up for re-election every 4 years instead of just a handful of senators in each class being up for re-election in a midterm or presidential election year. But now, all senators from all states will be up for re-election in every presidential election. This would mean no more off-year elections for U.S. congressional elections, and voters in each of their states can focus more on electing leaders in their state and local governments for off-year elections. But not to get off topic here, let's go through a walkthrough of how dual member proportional is carried through in Senate elections. Let's say in the 2020 election, all the Senate seats in every state were for an election. So under the rules of dual member proportional, we first apply the first step, and this is assigning the first Senate seats in each state. We do that by selecting the primary candidate that has the highest percentage of the vote, or who received the most votes in that state, will ultimately win the first seat in any of the 50 states. And if the primary candidate from that party does very well there by reaching 50% of the vote or more in that state, then their secondary candidate will be given a chance to win the second Senate seat in that region of the country, where all the other secondary candidates from the other parties will be eliminated from the race, and the remaining primary candidates will be subject to the 5% threshold. A primary candidate that does not meet the 5% threshold is eliminated from the race, and voters that selected those candidates and all those voters that selected those candidates will have their next choices counted to redistribute their votes to other candidates that do have 5% of the vote in any state. Independent candidates will only be elected if they place first or second in any state. But for an independent that only received third place of the vote or lower will be eliminated. And the voters that selected those independents as their first choice will have their next choices counted until you have four or multiple candidates receiving 5% of the vote in any state. As you see, the first seats have been assigned to the candidates or the primary candidates with the highest percentage of the vote, or who received the most votes out of all the candidates running in those individual states. Now we move over to the next step and look at the popular vote overall, and it will tell us how many remaining 50 Senate seats should be allocated to each party. The final step is vital because we take the seats each party should receive based on the popular vote and subtract the seats they've already won. And this will tell us how many remaining seats how many seats are left that should be rewarded to each party that reached the 5% threshold. But under dual proportional, each of the 50 remaining Senate seats will be assigned to each of the party's popular remaining candidates, with the caveat that only 2 candidates can be elected to represent a state in the U.S. Senate. And that's how dual proportional will work in the United States in the U.S. Senate elections. And based on the 2020 election, if we did use dual proportional, and every single senator was up for election every 4 years, the Republican Party will end up having the most seats in the U.S. Senate, but they don't have a majority anymore because of the proportional election result, to help give all parties that did receive 5% of the vote in every region of the country to get their fair share of the seats in the Senate. And how is this going to change governance with no party having a majority in the Senate? Political parties are going to have to start working with all parties to form a coalition with them, to form a governing consensus and get things done, like passing COVID relief, an electoral reform bill, addressing the national debt, and so many other policies to fix the major issues of our country's time. And everyone in this great country is getting served by the government. And as well, the whole idea of proportional is really breaking up the two-party system and giving more of a voice to everyone in this country, giving more of a voice to libertarians, Constitution Party people, and other minor parties, and even the major parties people, because if we just have more parties and give more of a fair shot to everyone, more people will feel like they have a voice in our elections. More people will feel like they have the power to govern a bit on the issues that are most salient to them, like progressives who care more, like who want to push for Medicare for all, who want to push for environmentalism. They can focus on the issues that are most salient to them with dual proportional. And what about fiscal conservatives? They can push more on the idea of addressing the national debt, being more fiscally responsible. They can have a party that will represent that value. And that's what the idea of dual proportional is going to bring. With no party having a majority, people are all going to work together. Everyone's going to have a chance to at least govern a bit. And yes, it's going to be a while to pass legislation, but that's okay. That's what the founding fathers wanted. They wanted they wanted Congress to be a slow process to protect the liberties of the American people, because that's what our Constitution sets up: self-government to protect the individual rights of all people, and that's one to protect the individual rights of all people. But not to get off topic here. So let me hear what you guys. But overall, dual proportional will overall achieve better representation of the people in every region of the country, and truly create a government that's of, by, and for the people. So let me hear what let me hear your guys' thoughts about dual proportional in the comment section below. Do you agree and like the idea of DMP electing our senators for 4-year terms, or do you disagree with my proposal and have a totally different idea on reforming the upper chamber of Congress, or do you have a different suggestion on how we can use DMP to elect our senators? And remember, all of us can be agents of change that will fundamentally reimagine the promise of America for the better for all people. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe to see more content on this channel. But until next time, guys, it's the Young Centrist, and I am out.